Ohio Debate Commission and residents from across the Buckeye State. Now, we remind the audience to mute your phones and to refrain from applause or making noise or attempting to participate or influence the debate. No photography or recording is allowed. A random drawing determined the order of opening remarks and questions, and with that, let's debate. Congressman Ryan, you have 1 minute for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Curtis. I want to also thank the Ohio Debate Commission for putting this on. We are at a very unique moment in the history of this country. We're coming out of a global pandemic. We're coming out of a global economic collapse. We have war in Ukraine. Things are messed up right now. And as I watch the Republican primary debate, it is clear that they are unqualified to be able to address the issues we are facing today. We have got to meet this moment. And this Senate race in Ohio is important to shift the national perspective on how we're going to move forward. Ohio has always been a leader in industry, in service to the military, in how we treat our veterans, research, manufacturing. And so Ohio has to lead the way in bringing our supply chain back, taking on China, building the things that will build our future. That's going to happen right here in Ohio. I'd appreciate your help and support. I want to go to Washington, D.C. to help lead Ohio and lead this country.
Congressman Ryan, thank you. Ms. Harper.
Well, thank you again to the Ohio Debate Commission and Central State University for hosting us today. My name is Morgan Harper, and I am running to be your next United States Senator. I was born in Columbus, given up for adoption. I lived in a foster home as an infant, and then was adopted and raised by my mom, a public school teacher. We went through a lot early on, but with a strong community around us, I was able to be in a position to get scholarships to go to Princeton University and Stanford Law School. And that made me laser focused on making sure, just like I got, that every Ohioan gets a fair shot. And when I got to Washington after the financial crisis, working at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau during the Obama administration, I started to understand why that has become less of a possibility than ever. That place has been infiltrated by special interests that have prevented it from working for us. And that's why I want to be your next United States Senator, to make sure that we have Medicare for all, increase the minimum wage, and protect our fundamental rights. My name is Morgan Harper, and I look forward to debating the issues today.
And TRACI T.J. Johnson, your opening statement.
Thank you all for being a part of this moment. I was born and raised in Toledo. To Ellen, a single mother with 4 children. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. My mother was a passionate teacher. And after 30 years of service, she retired and then lived with me for 15 years until she passed away recently at the age of 91. Now, during my journey as a caregiver, I remained a community activist. For the past 20 years, I've been a ward committee woman fighting for workers' rights, a woman's right to choose, and criminal justice reform. I started a successful information technology company, and I invested the fruits to help my niece and nephews graduate from college, because it takes a village to raise a family. Now, Democrats, I know what's at stake in this election. We have to get people back to work so they can put more money in their pockets. We have to defeat Trumpism, and we have to unify and uplift Ohio for a better tomorrow. My name is TRACI T.J. Johnson, and I want to be your next United States Senator.
Candidates, thank you. We now move on to questions. Tim Ryan, the first question goes to you. You all have 90 seconds to answer, followed by the same question to Ms. Harper and Ms. Johnson. First question, Congressman Ryan. The war in Ukraine has entered a precarious phase. NATO is doubling its forces near the Ukraine border to protect our allies, and at the same time, there is an increased threat of Russia using chemical, biological, or even nuclear weapons. Every provocation raises the risk of invoking Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. An attack on one is an attack on all. But Article 5 is not automatic. Each nation is free, in accordance with its own constitutional processes, to determine if an attack has occurred and whether a military response is merited. Twofold question here. If Article 5 is invoked, should President Biden seek approval from both houses of Congress to act? And if he does, How would you vote on an authorization for the use of military force against Russia?
Thank you, Curtis. I believe that he should come to Congress, and I would support it. I think we have democracy on the line here. We have done a good job of getting the Ukraine some of the armaments that they need to push back. Look, Putin is a butcher. He's a killer, he's a war criminal, and he is slaughtering innocent people. And I think we actually need to do more. I think we need to figure out a way to get airplanes to Ukraine. They are showing tremendous courage. Zelensky is showing tremendous leadership. The people on the ground are. I believe that the United States has a responsibility to figure out how they can protect air support. And I know some people say, well, Putin's going to escalate. Putin already escalated. He escalated when he bombed maternity hospitals, he bombed hospitals, and then he bombed and most recently, bombed a theater that he knew was filled with women and children. He's telling his generals to kill innocent people. I just don't believe that the United States can stand by and not at least help provide these folks with some air support that they would understand, not wanting a no-fly zone, but getting them airplanes to be able to protect themselves. And I just want to make one other point on this. There is one country in the world right now that could pick up the phone and end this war, and that's China. And they're looking the other way. They're finding ways to support Russia and play both sides. They want to defeat the United States, and they're willing to slaughter innocent Ukrainians and help the Russians do that.
Ms. Harper, how would you vote on an authorization to use military force against Russia?
Well, what Putin is doing is an absolute travesty, harming and killing Ukrainians just brazenly, and we have to have a strong response. And so that's why I have been outspoken about imposing aggressive economic sanctions against Putin and those around him who are enabling him. And we need to continue to use all of our tools at our disposal to make sure that we are controlling that threat. That is about Putin also growing in his alliances with the Chinese government, and it is a threat to our global security and economy. And so in addition to sanctions, I agree with what the administration has done so far in pursuing diplomatic solutions. And if it comes to the place where we have to consider whether or not to use military force, then absolutely, President Biden should come to Congress and ask for that authorization. And we have to be serious about whether or not we're willing to use it. And I would certainly be willing to consider that if it comes to it. But we also have to keep in mind about what we've been through over the last 20 years as a country, where we have seen a lot of military intervention that perhaps moved too quickly without always having the full information. And I want to be clear-headed to make the right decisions for our foreign policy. That is why I've committed to not accept any money from any sector, including the defense contracting sector, that my opponent here today has taken over $400,000 from over the course of his career, while we have seen so much harm to our economy and our people here at home.
Congressman, I'll give you a chance to rebut, but first, Ms. Johnson, authorization on the use of force of military force against Russia.
So first, we constantly need to keep the Ukrainian people in our prayers, because what's happening to their country is devastating and tragic. I am reminiscent of a song by War. It says, "War, what is it good for?" And the answer is absolutely nothing. Now, President Putin isn't a dangerous man. He's a strategic man, and he knows exactly what he's doing. He invaded Georgia, Crimea. He was even meddled in our 2016 elections, and now he's invaded Russia. He's basically gone unchecked, and we have to end his reign of terror. And now he's threatening weapons of mass destruction. Now, I support the work that we've done, and I want to applaud President Biden for sending our troops to Poland to assist in humanitarian crisis. I support our government when they impose sanctions, cutting off the financial lifeline of President Putin and his oligarchs. I also supported the military and economic and humanitarian relief that we provided to the country. I believe at the end of the day, what's most important is that we keep United States safe, we keep our troops safe, we provide Ukraine with the resources to defend themselves, And we work in accordance with NATO to make sure that the NATO countries that surround the Ukraine are protected.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Congressman, chance to rebut.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Harper, again, being very judicious with how we use our military, which is why 20 years ago I was very publicly out against the war in Iraq. I thought that was stupid, and it ended up costing us trillions and trillions of dollars that we should have used instead of building Iraq and Afghanistan. We should have been building the United States.
On the issue of the contractors, do you want to respond?
Well, I just want to say Ohio is a state that has a lot, tens of thousands of jobs that are directly connected to the defense industry, good paying union jobs here in Ohio. And I don't think we need to waste money, but I don't think we should immediately be pulling the plug. These are businesses that, of course, I'm going to work with them. They're putting jobs into Ohio and employing Ohioans. Now, quickly, I have fought the Department of Defense on wasteful spending, including if it was an Ohio company. So TransDigm, which was bilking the taxpayer, bilking the Department of Defense, I took them on. And they ended up getting fined tens of millions of dollars for what they did wrong. So you can have both a strong defense, create jobs in the United States, and take on waste, fraud, and abuse in the Department of Defense.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to the next topic. We're going to talk Supreme Court. As you know, the nominating committee for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson is currently actually meeting. They're moving steadily ahead with her vote. This, however, has raised a lot of questions about the political nature of the court, as some are calling it, and what can be done to ensure its legitimacy and integrity going forward. Ms. Harper, what do you think of Supreme Court reform? You actually favor stacking the court.
Yeah, and before I get to that, which I am very excited to answer that question, I do want to come back to one thing that was just said by the congressman, that equating having to take money, which really are bribes from corporations that are only enriching defense contractors, not here at home, but actually in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and those executives become very rich as a cost of keeping their business in our state. Wow. Wow, a real misunderstanding of what leadership should be and what it takes to have good economic development for the state of Ohio. Now, getting to the issue of expanding the Supreme Court, which I do support. We now have an institution of our government, the Supreme Court, that has been radicalized by the GOP, that has pushed through these confirmations, and we need to be honest about the fact that that is happening and that it no longer represents the majority of the will of the people living in the state of Ohio or across this country. We need to recalibrate it, we need to balance it, and especially when we see what's happening right now with abortion access and their radical approach there, it is necessary that we both rebalance the Supreme Court, expand it. We need to codify Roe v. Wade into law, and we need to make sure that we get rid of the filibuster to make that possible. Very much support those things.
Ms. Johnson, Supreme Court reform.
Yeah, so Roe versus Wade is under attack like never before. And the decisions that are coming out of the Supreme Court tells us that we need to look at our justice system, and we need to look at the court systems. I'd like to first thank President Biden for his nomination of Judge Jackson as the first African-American nominee to the Supreme Court. But in regards to stacking the court, I think we need to tread lightly, because if we expand the court as Democrats, then when Republicans come in, they'll expand the court, and then the court will lose its power. I believe that we need to assess the decisions that are coming out. We need to make sure that we're getting conservative, liberal, and Democratic opinions from the court. We need to stop the Republican rule. Donald Trump has stacked the court, and he's provided an unbalanced and conservative viewpoints from the court. And we need more balance. We need more justice. The courts need to be fair. They need to be reflective of the people in our country and our community, so that the decisions that are coming out are reflective of good policy, of good justice, and justice for all, for which the courts are intended for.
Congressman Ryan, the issue of Supreme Court reform.
Yeah, if I could just quickly go back to the issue here in Ohio. There's over 1,000 workers at the Lima tank plant. Those people aren't living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. They're in Lima, Ohio, slogging it out, making a living. There are dozens and dozens of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 suppliers average Ohioans, white, black, brown, men, women, working in these defense industries. And I will always go to bat for them. I will always go to bat for them. We can figure out waste, fraud, and abuse. We can be judicious with how we use our military. But I will always be on the side of workers. And just because they work in the defense industry doesn't mean I'm going to turn my back on them. I'm going to fight for them too. When it comes to the Supreme Court, I'm not for stacking the court. I believe that we need to nominate justices like Justice Jackson, Judge Jackson, and I think she is the epitome of who we want on the Supreme Court, a record of working on behalf of working people, a record of protecting Roe v. Wade, always considering all different aspects and families who would potentially be affected by the decisions. But I don't think we should stack the court. I am for getting rid of the filibuster. I think that can solve 90% of the problems that we have by passing legislation that we've passed out of the House to codify Roe v. Wade with the Women's Health Protection Act, as Ms. Morgan mentioned, that goes to the Senate to die. So I think the real response here is get rid of the filibuster and start passing these important pieces of legislation that we've passed out of the House.
All right, let's move on. This is an issue that's very important to a lot of people in this room. During a town hall here at Central State University, many said that the most important issue for them right now is voting rights. Over the last year, as you are all aware, Republican-led state legislatures have passed unprecedented measures that many believe are tools of voter suppression that give more partisan control over elections. Legislation that ensures the right of the people to control their government, including the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, as you all know, failed because Democrats were unable to overcome a Republican filibuster that requires 60 votes to end debate and vote on legislation. 2 Democrats, as you know, also opposed changing the filibuster and advancing voting rights legislation. Start with you, Congressman. You've already said you want to get rid of the filibuster. You want to do the same for voting rights.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. There's no more fundamental sacred right that we have in this country than for average people to be able to go to the ballot box and influence where their government goes on the economy, on foreign policy, on how we treat each other, on the big decisions that we make. And so I supported proudly the John Lewis bill, named after my friend and colleague John Lewis, which increases access to the ballot box, which makes Election Day a holiday, which allows you to be able to register to vote and vote on the same day. Look what we're dealing with here in Ohio with regard to redistricting. We need some level of honesty with redistricting reform, where Obama wins here twice, and yet the whole legislature flipped from almost being equal to lopsided towards the Republicans. So to me, this is about playing fair. It's not about picking your voters as elected officials. It's about allowing the voters to pick you. And so we got to follow the law. I think we've got to pass the John Lewis bill. Again, another example, and there's a long list of them, Curtis, of examples of in the House of Representatives, I co-sponsored, I voted for, I advocated for these bills. They go to the Senate, and the Senate is a place where great ideas go to die. And unfortunately, the voting rights bill is one of them.
Ms. Johnson, getting rid of the filibuster for voting rights.
The filibuster has been used historically to deny African Americans social justice and civil rights. It has a negative connotation, and it should either be reformed or eliminated. During history, the filibuster has been used to block anti-lynching, fair employment, and civil rights for African Americans. So we need to reassess the process of the filibuster and consider whether parts of it need to be reformed or totally eliminated. In regards to voting rights, the Republicans have waged war on voters, and they know that African Americans are a strong voting bloc, and they are doing anything they can to win elections, even if it means cheating. They've made voter ID laws harder. They've taken polling places out of communities of color, and that impacts seniors, the LGBT, and students. They want to deter us from voting. They want long lines. They're using 1930 and 1940 Jim Crow law tactics to prevent us from voicing our opinion and having our voices heard and being able to vote, understand that this is a strategy. Please make sure that you check to make sure that you're registered. In Ohio, 2 million people were taken off the voting roll in 2011. We have to make sure that we keep our voting rights, that we keep our voice, and that we have fair access to the voting booth and that the system stays fair.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Appreciate it. Ms. Harper.
Yes, I wholeheartedly support getting rid of the filibuster to be able to protect our voting rights and passing the legislation that is currently in the Senate to make that happen. But again, we need to be honest about where we are. We are not living in normal times. And though the congressman has been in Washington for 20 years, he still seems to think that it's business as usual. It is not. We have a Supreme Court that is very willing to strip away our rights, and we have to take aggressive action. And so, yes, I was so happy, like so many others across the country, especially being a Black woman in the legal profession, to see that Ketanji Brown Jackson did such a great job in her confirmation hearings, despite all of the vitriol that was thrown at her. And I hope that she is speedily confirmed. But it will not be enough. We do not have the majority. We do not have an institution of government that respects and reflects what we stand for as a country, and we have to be bold. And so that is why we have to recalibrate the Supreme Court. There's historic precedent for doing that, and I would be supportive of moving in that direction. And I do want to come back to another point that was made about workers in the state of Ohio. To the workers of the state of Ohio, I want you to know very clearly, I stand on your side, and I don't need to take money from management to do that. Because when I was in Lima, Ohio, walking on Labor Day with workers, hearing about the challenges that they're facing, you know what they were bringing up to me? Not one person asked whether or not I was taking corporate money from defense contractors. But you know what they asked about? Healthcare, that they can't keep up with the costs of it. That's what I'm focused on. I will always be on the side of Ohio's workers.
Thank you. It's only fair. I'll give you 30 seconds, Congressman, to respond.
Yeah, no, I think I was very, very clear. Again, like, this is about the workers. We've seen CEO pay increase 1,300% since the 1970s. Pay for average workers has been stagnant. I'm going to fight like hell for those workers. Now, you can't just tell me just because you're working in a tank plant that I'm not going to work with your business owners. I mean, we've got, if you want to take jobs out of Ohio and out of the country, I'll be your worst enemy. You want to bring jobs to Ohio and to the United States, I'll be your biggest friend.
All right, thank you, Congressman. Let's move on to the next question. This is a comment from Julie in Cincinnati, who wrote, please tell us concretely what you have done already for the citizens of the state of Ohio that qualifies you for the office that you're running for. Ms. Harper, we'll start with you.
Yes, thank you for the question, Julie. So, as I mentioned in my introduction, one of the formative experiences of my career so far has been working at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau during the Obama administration, going after the big banks that caused the foreclosure crisis that hit so many Ohioan families very hard. And what I saw there as we were doing some of that work, not just related to the mortgage industry, but also going after Wells Fargo that was opening up fake bank accounts in people's names. We got $12 billion back to 28 million consumers around the country, including here in Ohio. But I also witnessed that we could have been doing even more if we had members of Congress who were always on the side of working people. But instead, I observed that special interests have infiltrated that place and have sometimes slowed progress. Like, for example, when we were trying to move forward to protect the Black community from being imposed with higher car loan interest rates, my opponent here today was blocking our ability to do that, to check that predatory activity. So we have a real decision to make right now as Ohioans. Are we going to continue to accept business as usual, Washington, special interest politics, or are we going to move towards the future together to really demand more? Because we need it. Because I am meeting so many people across our state who cannot live another 20 years like the past 20, and I will be firmly on the side of us.
Ms. Johnson, what have you done concretely for the citizens of Ohio that you believe qualifies you for the Senate?
I'm currently a ward committee woman and been a ward committee woman for 20 years, fighting for working families and the middle class. I've spent a lifetime fighting for Ohioans, and it began in state government when I worked for the Office of Budget and Management, and when I worked for the Office of Budget and Management, I balanced our Ohio budget and made sure Ohio was fiscally sound. When I worked for the Ohio Attorney General's Office Consumer Protection Division, I fought for Ohioans so that they could have business and fair business practice in the marketplace. When I worked for the Environmental Protection Agency, I fought for Ohioans' air, land, and water. And when I worked for the governor's office on the Commission for LGBT issues, what did I do? So I'm going to breathe because cameras intimidate me. So when I worked for the governor's office on the Commission on LGBT issues, we drafted legislation that made it a discrimination to discriminate against someone against their gender identity and sexual orientation. I have worked on behalf of working families and middle class. I have an extensive year in state government.
Ms. Johnson, your
Yes.
time is up.
Oh,
But-
thank you.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the next question here.
Do I get a chance to answer that question?
Yes.
30 seconds.
Thanks, Curtis. So I'm proud of fighting against every trade agreement that came down the pike except for renegotiating NAFTA, which was a good thing, fought tax cuts for the wealthiest people on numerous occasions, helped pass the Affordable Care Act, which increased health care coverage for 900,000 Ohioans, helped put together the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that Ms. Harper mentioned in her last answer. We saved the pension. Sherry Brown and I worked on this for tens of thousands of Ohioans who are going to have their pension cut in half to 2/3.
Oh, sir, I'm sorry, we want to move on.
That's
We
okay.
make sure we get to all the
That's
other
all right.
topics. You're watching Voters First, the 2022 Ohio U.S. Senate Democratic primary debate, a presentation of the Ohio Debate Commission with the support of AARP Ohio. Our partners for this debate include the Shar and Chuck Fowler Family Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, the George Gund Foundation, and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Murray and Agnes Season Good Government Foundation, Tecovas Foundation, City Club of Cleveland, and the Ohio Association of Broadcasters. Let's move on. Another big topic that came up from our audiences is the economy, namely right now, inflation, the cost of child care and health care, gas prices, and the impact of student loan debt. Congressman Ryan, you supported Build Back Better, which, among other things, promised to address the aforementioned higher cost in some areas. It also repealed the state and local taxes cap, or the SALT cap, disproportionately affecting homeowners in high-income home value states like New Jersey and New York. No SALT, no deal, warned your fellow Democrats in blue states, and at first you called the SALT repeal BS, and we don't mean Bachelor of Science. You then voted in favor of Build Back Better, which raised the cap from $10,000 to $80,000. The centrist-leading Brookings Institution and the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center conclude that SALT deductions heavily favor the rich. Why did you support it?
Well, it also helped middle-class people. You get into big cities, there are working-class people in some of these cities, in our towns as well, that deserve some relief. The whole package included universal preschool for across the board in the United States, which is absolutely something we need to do. If we're going to outcompete China, we got to make sure we're investing in education. Paid family and medical leave was in there, something that should have been done 30 or 40 years ago. We're the only industrial economy in the world that doesn't have paid family and medical leave. A huge tax cut for families who have children with the child tax credit, which we advanced, which was huge. Glasses, hearing aids, dental, for the Medicare program, so our seniors didn't have to come out of pocket. Child care costs were capped at 7%, so that families, wouldn't go bankrupt because they needed some child care. So you got to vote on these things on the whole, and I thought there were a lot of really good things in there. Look, I'm for the top 1%, the wealthiest paying more. As I said earlier, average CEO pay has gone up 1,300%. We need to ask them to pay more, not because we hate them, not because we're anti-business, but because we only have 330 million people in this country. If we're going to outcompete China, that's 1.4 billion, we need to invest into all of our communities, and we have to ask the wealthiest to pay more.
All right, Congressman, thank you. Now, this is going to be like a rapid fire sort of thing. We're going to take on different topics. If you want to spend some of your time addressing the topic that we're talking about to address something the Congressman or Ms. Harper or Ms. Johnson has said, you can feel free to do so. Ms. Johnson, or actually Ms. Harper, let's go to you. You support Medicare for all. How do you plan to pay for it?
Yeah, so I support Medicare for all, and this is actually one of my top priorities, universal health care, including mental health care, vision, hearing, because I'm hearing from so many Ohioans that it's not adding up. That even if you've gotten health care through the exchanges, it's almost as much as you're paying for your mortgage. That even if you have insurance through your employer, like union workers who I met in the Toledo area, deductibles are going up 3 times year over year. And so we need to do what every other developing country on this planet has done and provide health care for everyone. And it is the right thing to do and also the economically efficient thing to do. And how we begin to make sure that we have the resources to do that is by closing the tax loopholes that have allowed the same large multinational corporations that fund my opponents' campaigns to not pay their fair share. That's how we start. That's how we start. And I'll just say, one additional thing on Build Back Better, which, I would have supported, but why did that not pass? It's because of senators like Joe Manchin who obstruct, even though they're in our party. And though my opponent said that he was doing what he could to be able to pass that, he accepted money from Joe Manchin's PAC. We have to start being honest about what's going on, what's inhibiting progress, and what's going to make sure that all of Ohioans can be healthy moving forward.
Congressman, I'll give you a moment to rebut, but first let's go to Ms. Johnson. Ms. Johnson, on the subject of health care, medical debt is a very big problem in this state, leading cause of bankruptcy. How do you plan to address the ever-increasing cost of health care, even with things like Obamacare?
Yes. So health care should be a right, not a privilege. There were 60 million people who were without health care before Obamacare, but we have health care. We need to make it functional, affordable, and accessible, and then take a viable system and then transition it into Medicaid for all, which is health care for all. So I challenge my opponent, Morgan, on the difference between our current health care system and her Medicaid for all system. We have to make sure that not only are we looking at health care, we have to make sure that we're looking at mental health services as well. We have to make sure that people have the mental health care that they need. We have to make sure that we grow this economy from the middle out and not from the top down. And we have to make sure that as your next United States Senator, I will support the patient and the people who take care of them over corporate profits. When I was campaigning in Dayton, I came across a senior who shared with me her story that she has to cut her pills in half because she can't afford her prescription drugs and her food. I will take on the pharmaceutical companies to bring down these escalating drug prices, deductibles, and copays.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
We have to do that for Americans so that they can become well and eat.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Congressman, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to respond to candidate Harper's claim about the Manchin PAC.
Yeah, I mean, I welcome support from anybody who wants to support my campaign, and I think as she made the case there, she also said that I wasn't doing what Joe Manchin wanted me to do. So I don't know quite what the criticism is here. I have been very vocal about being for all of the elements of Build Back Better. I advocated for it. I spoke on the floor. I voted for it. And Joe Manchin wants to help another Democrat in the state that borders his. I just don't see what the criticism is.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. We'll stay with you, Congressman Ryan. Student loan debt. Major driver of income inequality, especially for Black Americans who carry more debt as it relates to education than their white counterparts. You have proposed student debt relief for essential workers, but there's a lot of evidence that suggests that the government lending for education has systemic problems that do more to expand the inequality than to fix it. Should more be done as it relates to student loans? And if so, how?
Yeah, of course. And I'm for a very comprehensive way to solve this problem. My wife, Andrea, and I are still paying off her student loans. And I think it's outrageous that people who want to go try to get ahead in life, try to invest into themselves, invest into their education, are paying these exorbitant rates, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13%. It's insane. How do we think we're going to outcompete China, grow the middle class, if we're strapping families with these huge amounts of debt? So I think one of the issues I'm pushing now is how do we allow people to renegotiate down the interest rate? We don't need the banks benefiting from all this. Get that rate down to 1 or 2%. Put money in people's pockets. I do think if you took out a loan, you should pay it. But put more money in your pocket, and that'll help you buy a car, buy a house, and be able to reinvest back into the economy. In the recent appropriations bill, and I sit on the Appropriations Committee, we increased the money for Pell Grants. We've got to increase grant money. But look, 74% of the people in Ohio don't go to college. So we've got to make sure that we're also focusing on how do we build that workforce up too. We need to get shop class back in our schools. One of the dumbest things we've ever done is tell everybody they got to go to college, right? We need to get shop class back. We need to make sure we got financial literacy back. We got to have robust investments in our joint vocational school, encourage apprenticeships into our union. I mean, even the big Intel project in Columbus, they're saying there's going to be thousands of jobs there that will not require a college degree. So we've got to make sure we take care of them as well.
Thank you, Ms. Harper. Student loan debt, how would you fix it?
Yeah, the student loan crisis is at this point a multi-generational crisis. When I was at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau during the Obama administration, we did great research showing just how much this has become an issue that hits people across the age spectrum. We have grandparents that are on the hook for this debt, parents, and as is talked about a lot of young people. I'm meeting young people that don't even feel comfortable that they would want to have a family because of the level of student debt burden. And by the way, some of these young people are now, like me, almost 40, over 40, into 50s. We need to cancel the debt. We need to create economic opportunity for people all over Ohio and make sure that we can be a state of the future. And what can that future look like? I call it Ohio Opportunity Guarantee. We need to be investing to create up to 600,000 jobs in the clean energy sector over the next 10 years. We need to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past 20 with all of the student debt by ensuring we have debt-free training and educational opportunities for people to pursue four-year college degrees, vocational training, and other training that they might need to be part of this workforce so that every Ohioan has the ability, just like I'm so grateful that I got the chance to live out your potential regardless of what region you live in. And I'll just say, I mean, just this week I was in Sandusky County and a woman told me how stressed she is for her daughter, who went to school, got a degree, has this debt, and is now back at home because she can't afford to keep up with the bills and also be able to afford housing. We've got to move. We've got to move quickly.
We're going to move on to the next question, and this is going to be for you, Ms. Johnson. Several Ohioans have wrote about gun violence, including Donna in Columbus, John in Newton, John in Xenia. So what are you going to do to fix this issue? Because there are a lot of complicating factors when it comes to guns. You don't have the research that necessarily shows any sort of causal relationship. There's very little political support. How would you address the issue of gun violence?
So Ohio has the weakest laws on gun and gun violence. Our communities are, especially the African-American communities, have a ton of guns that are just available for homicides, robberies, and accidental discharge. We have to make sure that these guns are off the street. And once elected, I will create policies that pull guns off the street and make our communities safe. There was a 24-year-old in Dayton. She went on the 32nd rampage, killing 9 people and injuring 17. Washington did nothing. Our Ohio House was silent. We have to get our guns off the street because they're killing our children, they're killing our family members. we just have to do better when it comes to guns
All right, Ms. Johnson.
and gun safety.
Thank you. Congressman Ryan, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to rebut here.
Yes, I, again, supported in the House of Representatives universal background checks, closing the Charleston loophole, closing the gun show loophole. I think it's critical. We see what's happening on our streets. Everybody should feel safe in the community that they live in the United States of America. And that's going to mean that we need to make sure we're addressing these issues of safety, but making sure we're, again, passing these things. But that's why I want to go to the Senate, because if you go to the Senate, then you can get rid of the filibuster, and you can pass some basic gun safety measures like we did in the House of Representatives.
All right, Ms. Harper, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Are you satisfied that enough has been done during Congressman Ryan's tenure in the House to address gun violence?
On gun violence. Just to emphasize, and this is an issue, it's one of the most common things that has come up in traveling around the state. I have a friend who lost his daughter to gun violence, something we don't talk about enough, that a lot of this loss is due to suicide. And we need to move quickly. And so we need to ensure that we, yes, are implementing strong federal protection like universal background checks, preventing people from having access to weapons who aren't in a position to manage them effectively, but then also, and importantly, addressing the root causes of violence. Things like the fact that people don't have enough money. Poverty is a factor that very much influences whether or not communities are going to be more subject to violence. And this is why we also need Medicare for all. My opponent, a former member of the NRA, former A rating of the NRA, and has blocked the ability to hold gun manufacturers accountable when mass shootings occur. We cannot live like this. We have to move boldly to be able to protect our communities and keep them safe.
Ms. Harper, I want to finish up. We're running a little bit closer to the time, so keep that in mind. But I want to talk about the environment. Climate change, major issue. We'll start with you, Ms. Harper. You've had proposals that are very aggressive when it comes to climate change. However, since February 24th, 33 days ago, with Russia's attack on Ukraine, we're looking at a situation that's way different as it relates to the production of energy and how we get it overseas in order to support Europe and get them off of Russian oil. Does this in any way change your approach to dealing with climate change?
Well, we have two different things that you're mentioning, and thank you for the question. First, we have an emergency situation with what is going on with gas prices and in Ukraine and what has really hit the pocketbooks of so many people in Ohio. And so I think that we should take emergency measures to address what's happening. We should be considering things like repealing the gas tax that's adding an additional 30 cents a gallon in some cases to what's now over $4 a gallon for a lot of Ohioans. We need to make sure that we're addressing windfall profits that big oil, big gas, that fossil fuel industry is taking advantage of this moment of true global humanitarian crisis to be able to just continue to milk the working people of our state. Those are the short terms, but moving forward, again, we need to be honest about where we're headed. We need to make sure that we are investing in the renewable energy sector that is going to be putting us in a stronger position as a country from a national security and an economic perspective. And that is why I have made a commitment to not accept any money from the fossil fuel industry so that I will be able to fight for that agenda in the United States Senate. And I will note, and coming back to a theme that I have already touched on, we have to have a U.S. Senator that is going to be clear-headed about what's best for Ohioans. And my opponent has taken $100,000 from First Energy, for example, fossil fuel industry that is responsible for one of the biggest corruption scandals in our state's history. This is not the type of leadership that is going to be able to move us where we need to go, which is into the renewable energy sector.
Ms. Harper, thank you. Congressman, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to rebut and to also answer the question of how, if at all, policy as it relates to climate should change since Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
All in 30 seconds.
All in 30 seconds.
I got you. First of all, First Energy is in my district. Thousands of workers are there. Of course, we want to always fight for those workers. I stood on picket lines in Toledo with workers in the oil industry. I rallied with workers in Lima taking on big oil. So I always have been there for the workers. When I hear about climate, I hear opportunity to create millions of jobs, whether it's building electric vehicles in Lordstown, whether it's being out at First Solar in Toledo. They're having a 2,000 square foot expansion, the Intel project to do the chips that go in there. Ultimately, these are opportunities for us. The infrastructure bill that we passed that has $7.5 billion in it for us to do charging stations, voted for that, and that's going to create 600,000 jobs. So there's opportunity here in the new economy, and I'm all in for that.
Congressman, thank you. That is going to conclude the questioning portion of the debate. We have a few minutes left for closing statements. Each of you will have 90 seconds to respond. Congressman Ryan, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, Curtis, thank you. Central State, thank you. Ohio Debate Commission, thank you. To my colleagues here, thank you. You know, my grandfather worked in an economy that was a lot different than the ones that we're seeing now, and the one that so many families are living in now. He was a steel worker for 40 years at National Gypsum in Niles, Ohio. And he didn't have to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. He did during the war, but after that, he could work for 40 hours a week and make a good, solid living. He had a garden that he would cultivate. My grandmother would go out there, and they were Italian, so we had all this good Italian food that came fresh out of the garden. He was the lead usher at 1045 Mass at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church. He was the head of the beer tent at the festival in the summertime. He was able to participate in civic life because he didn't have to spend 6, 7 days a week, 12, 15 hours a day. That's what this election is about. That's the direction we need to move in. Start cutting workers in on the deal. This has been going on for generations now, where the top 1% get all the benefits and the workers get screwed. And I'm tired of it. And they're white workers, black workers, brown workers, men, women, manufacturing, service. It's across the board. And I'm going to fight like hell for every worker in this state and in this country when I get to the United States Senate. And we're going to start cutting workers in on a deal. We're going to start asking the top 1% to pay their fair share, but we're going to build America, we're going to rebuild the middle class, and we're going to beat China. I'd appreciate your help and support. Tim for Ohio, timforoh.com. If you want to join the campaign, we'd love to have your support.
Congressman, thank you. Ms. Harper, your closing statement.
Thank you. When I was 6 years old, my mom, my brother, and I, we packed our belongings in trash bags, loaded up the trunk, and drove away from an abusive home. And it was in that moment that I started to understand what community is all about. It looked like Aunt Bee, who was down the street, who would give my mom extra time to make childcare payments, and Leon, who was around the corner, who let us stay with him while we were waiting for housing. And that is what instilled in me a fighting desire to make sure that everybody gets a chance to live out their potential. Every Ohioan. And when I got to Washington after the financial crisis, I started to understand why that possibility is slipping away more than ever. We have had a generation of leadership that has implemented and overseen policies that have left us less healthy and more financially vulnerable. So that I'm meeting people like a 22-year-old who's telling me in tears that she's not looking forward to being an adult because of the level of economic insecurity she's seen. Or like a 62-year-old who had one injury on the job, didn't get any benefits, and has had his house foreclosed on. Or just the other day, a 17-year-old running down the freeway outside of Columbus who has been involved in the criminal justice, with a gun, shooting at people, who's been involved in the criminal justice system from the time he was almost learning to read. We cannot continue to live like this. We need to have new leadership. That's why I'm running for the United States Senate, to implement Medicare for all, including vision, hearing, mental health care, to raise the minimum wage, to keep up with the cost of living, and to protect our fundamental rights, including the right to abortion access. My name is Morgan Harper. I would be honored to be your representative in the United States Senate.
Ms. Harper, thank you. Ms. Johnson, your closing statement.
So this was an interesting evening for me. This is my first time on a debate stage. This is my first time ever having an experience like this. But I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that I want to be your next United States Senator. And I'm doing this off a script. This is not what I've planned to say. All my life, I've worked for people. And I've entered people's lives when they were at the worst part of their lives. I've been there after their home has burned down, with the American Red Cross providing them with food, clothing, and shelter. I've been there for them when they are at the food pantry and they were at their wits' end with their babies and their children because life had hit them extremely hard, and now they're in a homeless shelter or in a food pantry getting food. I'm there to be a shoulder to cry on, and to have them lift their head up and remind them that bad days don't last long, and provide them with decency and respect, which a lot of people don't get when they're downtrodden and at their wits' end. I've worked for people not because I've looked for something in return, but because they've needed something. They've needed help, assistance. They needed someone to be there in their time of need, and I have always been the person to be there for them. I want to be your next United States Senator because you need somebody that cares about you. You need somebody that's going to create policies that make your life better. You need someone that's going to listen to you and then go to Washington and work on your behalf. We don't need any more divisiveness. We don't need any more debating. We don't need any arguing. What we need is unity and compassion and respect. And we want to hire leaders that understand that common decency is what's really going to get us through the day.
Ms. Johnson, thank you.
I'm running for your next United States Senator because I love you, I care for you, and I am really the best person that can represent you in the United States Senate.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And thank you, Central State. Give yourselves a round of applause. You guys were great. You know, we live in a time, as we all saw last night, some of us during the Oscars, where civility is in short supply. So I want to thank the candidates for showing civility during this debate. I want to thank you for being civil as you listened patiently and didn't respond with anything that would have caused us to, have to delay in any sort of way. This is what a democracy is about, right? We get together, we hear each other out, we leave, and then we go and we vote. So I want to make sure that that gets across to you. The most important thing for you to remember is not where all of these folks stand on the issues. It's to vote. Thank you again. And that is going to conclude today's debate. I'd like to thank the candidates, TRACI T.J. Johnson, Morgan Harper, and Congressman Tim Ryan for joining us. Voters First, the 2022 Ohio U.S. Senate Democratic primary debate has been presented by the Ohio Debate Commission. Funding for this debate was provided by AARP Ohio. This program made possible by the following organizations: the Shar and Chuck Fowler Family Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, the George Gund Foundation, and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Murray and Agnes Seasongood Good Government Foundation, Tecovas Foundation, City Club of Cleveland, and the Ohio Association of Broadcasters. Our host, Central State University. Give yourselves a quick round of applause again. And look, this is not the end. I want to remind everyone to tune in this evening for the Republican senatorial debate beginning at 7 p.m., hosted by the incredible Karen Kassler, State House Bureau Chief, Ohio Public Radio and TV. And finally, I'd like to thank again our audience and residents across the state for joining us. I'm Spectrum News 1 anchor Curtis Jackson. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to vote.